Hi friends, I'm Scott Giles, and I'm here on behalf of the Unitarian Universalist Society for Community Ministries. We've been trying to do a monthly Zoom meeting with interested participants on the various aspects of setting up and running an entrepreneurial community ministry. Now that means a community ministry where there isn't an institution or a company paying you a salary or compensation of some form. Instead, you are directly being paid by the people you help. Now, this is one of the most difficult forms of community ministry to do because you do have to learn to price your services appropriately. You need to ask yourself the question, what's it worth? And then put your answer to that question out in the form of an invoice that you're seriously expecting other people to pay. And there are all kinds of issues about running this kind of ministry. One of the most important things in terms of having such a successful ministry in your life is you have to control your overhead. Now, one of the problems I often see is that Unitarian Universalists tend to be upper middle class or from upper middle class families. People who go into our ministry are often people of privilege that were raised in privilege. They went to college with their parents footing the bill. They did well on their SATs because they had tutors paid for by their parents and so on. So for a big chunk of the life of many of these folks, there's always been something to help, to provide an easier and softer way. But once you enter entrepreneurial ministry, there is no easier, softer way. You're going to have to learn to do some things because an entrepreneurial ministry requires administration. It requires finance. It requires you know how to do the basics of accounting. It requires you to know at least something about legal writing and relevant laws. And no one is going to do any of this for you. You have to learn to do it yourself. And what I have found is a lot of my colleagues in Unitarian Universalist Entrepreneurial Community Ministry balk at having to learn to do things that are outside of their comfort zone. They somehow think that they should have people who will do that for them, but you don't have such people. Now, yeah, it is possible to outsource all of that. You can hire a bookkeeper. You can hire a receptionist to handle your phone. You can hire a webmaster to create your website. You can hire a virtual assistant to do your newsletter and all of that. And that's certainly easier than learning to do all of that stuff yourself. But you'll probably discover that you will be eaten alive by your overhead. Because if you have a downturn or money begins to get tight, you can't pay for those things that you're outsourcing anymore, and you end up going out of business. So the most successful entrepreneurial community ministries are those where the minister has simply learned things outside of their comfort zone, which they need to have to be able to function appropriately. So you learn how to set up and run a website. You learn how to publish a newsletter or a Substack. You learn how to do the basics of accounting so you can do your required tax reporting and so on. You learn how to market in the 21st century. And none of this is fun, but this is the work you have to do in order to be able to do the work that you want to do. Now, on the topic of controlling your overhead, where I go is to a model created by a group of primary care physicians called the Ideal Micro Practice. It's a high-tech, low-overhead practice. These physicians created this because they wanted to basically function independent of the hospital corporations that are taking over medicine in America and turning the physicians into hirelings, making them see patients for only a few minutes and putting up other bureaucratic restrictions that get in the way of care. And these physicians said, this isn't why we became physicians. We don't want to do that. So they turned to themselves, created a model for running a medical practice that doesn't require a big corporation holding you up, and that's the ideal micropractice. Originally created by L. Gordon Moore, a medical doctor, at Dartmouth Clinical Microsystems at Dartmouth Medical School. It was a reaction to the abuses of big medicine by creating a healthy, easy to manage, financially resilient practice. And I have found that this model, the moment I learned about it, and I learned about it by reading in the medical library of LaGrange Hospital, where one of my programs was based for 30 years, reading about it, I decided that this is something that I could do. So I reframed my practice as an ideal micropractice, and it worked. And I've now taught a number of hypnotic practitioners how to do this as well. In the 21st century, the practices that will do the best are those that are the most flexible. What you care about when you run your ministry from the financial side is your net profit, not your gross. I mean, a big showy practice that has lots of expenses can produce much less profit than a smaller, leaner practice that doesn't have to pay those overhead expenses. So by maximizing your flexibility, by keeping everything under your own control, you make your practice resilient. So the first part of the ideal micropractice model is to control your overhead by running lean. A home office, shared space, small offices, rather than big fancy build-outs in a medical office building or professional office building, because that kind of stuff gets very expensive very fast. I personally work from a home office and always have, and we bought the house with that in mind, so it's laid out appropriately, it's handicapped accessible, there is security, and so on. And there are lots of financial advantages to running a home office because often some of the legitimate expenses of the office also become expenses that you're saving in your house. Like we have the coffee that we serve here at our office. Well, that's paid for by the practice itself, not out of our grocery budget. So you learn to do things yourself. You're always looking for free ways to do things. You want to run lean. So, first point, control overhead by running lean. Second, use technology rather than staff. My client records are all electronic, and I use software that resides on my computer. There are companies out there that will be happy to sell you a vertical market system. The ones used by professional coaches work very well for entrepreneurial ministries, and they'll handle your bookkeeping, they'll handle your invoicing, they'll handle your credit card processing, they'll handle your records, and that can be a viable way to go, but you have no protection from back-end escalation. Once you've started with one of these companies, you're locked in. They can keep raising the prices and you just have to keep on paying it, because often you can't get your information out of these systems to take it somewhere else. So if you do decide to use a vertical market system as your form of technology rather than staff, be sure you check out that you own the data, not the company, and that you can get an accessible copy of it should you decide to move to a different platform or take it in-house. I had that experience. I had my initial records in a piece of online software. It worked well, but the company went bankrupt. And then the company that purchased the assets got hold of me and said they would be happy to sell my own information back to me. But I had to pay them to get my own information back, or they would just delete it. And that can happen. So we keep everything on our own computers and our own cloud drives and so on, so that can't happen anymore. But my records for clients are maintained just in a spreadsheet. That's perfectly adequate. I use electronic scheduling. We personally have used, we use the Square system, which handles our calendar and our credit card processing and so on. There are many other companies that do this. But the key thing is electronic scheduling. You don't want to have to sit at your desk all day to deal with client churn on the phone of people calling, rescheduling their appointments, wanting a different time, and all of that. With electronic scheduling, everything's scheduled online. You have an appointment to see me, you need to change it. There's a button you push on your screen, and you can directly change to the appointment yourself. You don't have to hook up with me. And before I did this, I would spend like 2 hours a day rescheduling and playing phone tag and all that. Electronic scheduling just minimizes all of that. It's scheduled on my website. You can go there. You can see when you're scheduled. You can change your appointment time if you need to without having to wait for me to call you back. And of course, we do electronic accounting and credit cards and all of that. Basically, you want to set up your electronic systems so that all communication is asynchronous, meaning people don't have to hook up with you to be able to make a change. They need to change their credit card, they can do that online. They need to change their appointment, they can do that online. They need to ask you a question, there's a form on the website where they can email that question to you. You basically want to use technology. And you want that technology to be safe so you can't be taken advantage of by a greedy technology provider. And you want to be sure that it's transparent enough for your clients to use so you don't have to constantly be playing phone tag and churning. The third thing is manage your administration. Always look for low-cost or no-cost ways of doing things. Whenever there's a piece of software that comes out, I'll evaluate it. But I do most of my practice using the native applications that come with the Apple operating system, Apple Notes, Numbers, Pages, and so on. And I'll just string those things together. First, they all work together pretty well on an Apple system. But also, I'm not paying subscription fees every month. I'm not paying for showing new upgrades to various pieces of software. If I'm using something that Apple provides as part of the operating system, I know they'll maintain it. I know they'll always give me an upgrade path, and it doesn't cost me anything. So always manage your practice, manage your administration as far as you can, low cost, no cost. And your marketing. I have a whole meeting here on leveraging social networking for marketing in the 21st century. But most practices market themselves these days online. They're not using magazine ads. They're not using things like, Yellow Pages and so on. You market online through your social networking platforms. We got a whole meeting about that if you want to take a look. You do podcasts, but this is how you get your name out there. So that's how you control your overhead. High tech, low overhead. You find free ways of doing things, low cost marketing, low cost administrative systems, and you have the fortitude to learn to do new things yourself. I know the moment I'm talking to a prospective community minister, if they resist having to learn new things or things that are outside of their comfort zone, I know they won't be successful. Because you can outsource all that stuff, but it'll be prohibitively expensive. And if you're not willing to do it yourself, you're not going to succeed. So take that for what it's worth. That's how I do it. Control your overhead. Next month, we'll be back with another group, and that one's going to be on getting paid, including how much should you charge for your services in a community ministry. Hope to see you there.